Hello and welcome to Fintech Today, where we get to meet the people behind the fintech revolution. I'm your host, Matt Hyde from Recruit One to One, a specialist in finding the best talent in the finance and the tech sector. Now, today we're thrilled to be joined by Chris Woolard, who is a partner at EY and the fintech leader in the UK. And also, we're the primary sponsors of the recent Fintech Awards London. So, hello, Chris, and welcome. How are you today?
Hi, Matt. Very well, thanks.
Great to have you with us. So maybe we could get straight into it. Maybe you could tell us what your main focus at EY is and what the role is there.
Yeah, I'd sort of have two roles for EY. The first is very much focused on regulation, where I spent an awful lot of my career. But then probably the most exciting growth area that I'm focused on is around fintech and leading what we do in the wider fintech market.
Excellent. And of course, we can see recently how EY is really expanding and growing in that sector, which is really, really good to see. So obviously, we're coming out of a challenging time with London. So how do you think the economy in London has fared post-COVID? And what predictions do you have maybe for the next 12 months?
So the period of COVID clearly placed an awful lot of strains on the economy. So not just on individual households, but also on small firms as well. And of course, there was a lot of assistance available from the government. But as that comes to an end, what we can see is, there's been 2 years really where, for example, the number of small firm insolvencies has been very low, and there feels like there's been quite a lot of resilience. But I think if you then add where we are in terms of the wider economy at the moment, inflation, particularly around energy prices, the knock-on effects of the Ukraine war, the continuing disruption to global supply chains that is a hangover to some extent from the worst phases of COVID, but also influenced by some other factors. If you put all those together, I mean, it's going to be a really, really challenging business environment in the next few months to come, probably the next couple of years to come. However, at the same time, I think particularly in financial services, we are still seeing a high degree of resilience in many of the firms that we work with. And I think also customers and business are really interested in ways in which they can access greater efficiency, how they can actually deliver products that more consumers want to actually use on a regular basis. And so in terms of the fintech sector, I think there's some really interesting things that can be done there. And then obviously you have programs like Fintech for Good, thinking about how actually the cost of living crisis can be influenced by using the right kinds of fintechs too to help consumers with their budgeting and so on and so forth. So there's some really promising developments, I think, in the fintech market, but set very much against a really tough operating environment.
Yeah, I think we're hearing a lot of that, but I think it's great to see that London and the UK, when it comes to fintech, is incredibly resilient. And I think with COVID, how many companies have done so well through COVID, or what everyone thought was a challenging time. And you're probably seeing that from a lot of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think and I think the way you've just described it is absolutely right. It has been an incredibly challenging time, and yet those who have served the market well have also been able to still grow and seeing reward from that. And I think the other point that you make is utterly correct as well, which is fintech for many years, and in the work I did when I was previously a regulator before EY, working around things like Project Innovate, the sandboxes run by the FCA, those sorts of things, you get to appreciate that actually the UK really is genuinely, in many spaces, a world leader. And where it isn't a world leader, it's often number two. So fintech is a really important part of the UK economy and a really important part of our future as well. And so, that's one of the reasons why, from an EY perspective, as you mentioned, we're investing in this space. We're making sure that we've got the right set of services to serve, not only smaller fintechs, but actually those that are maturing, and indeed the relationships that will occur between really well-established firms and some of the newer fintechs as time progresses. Because we really do see fintech as being a really important part of the UK's economic future.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's plain to see for all of us. And that ties in really, I suppose, with the next point about the Fintech Awards London. You got involved right at the start, primary sponsor. What was the motivation for getting involved in the awards?
Yeah, I mean, there clearly are a number of award schemes out there in the fintech world. There's a lot of firms, there's a lot of different ways you can think about innovation. For EY, I mean, we are working with schemes across the UK, but clearly, London really is the largest centre for fintech in the UK at the moment. You've got a mixture of both the tech, but also banking, government, all really in one location, which is really important for growing firms and a real advantage, I think, for the UK as a whole. So it's important for us to really get involved in that, to be able to be part of a real celebration of talent. And I think one of the things that struck me as being one of the judges was, firstly, how the potential shortlisted firms are really sort of put through their paces. I mean, this really felt like quite a tough competition, I think, for those firms that were involved, rather than the sort of a vanity project or just another awards in inverted commas. But then also, I think when you look at the range of winners we had and some of the things that they've been able to achieve, I mean, it's really, really important that we celebrate that.
Definitely. Interesting that the head of regulatory for the FCA is talking about a tough process. So there you go. That was a tough process for them, wasn't it? But it needs to be, doesn't it? I think that's the whole point. If you want to be the best, you've got to work hard, haven't you, and prove that. So thinking of those awards then, what impact do you think and do you feel that the FinTech Awards in London can really have on the sector?
So I think, one of the biggest things they can do is actually highlight the breadth and the range that we see within the sector. I mean, I think that one of the other things that was really, really good to see was, particularly amongst some of the younger winners coming through, and actually, some of the really key firms actually that took some of the top prizes. There really was a genuine diversity of talent as well, and I think we need to make sure the wider market understands that. I think EY has been involved in a whole range of things designed to try and boost the wider diversity of the fintech sector, such as women in finance and women in fintech. And actually, many of our winners came from very different ethnic minority backgrounds than perhaps sometimes the traditional view of people who are engaged in fintech, particularly around the London market. So, I mean, the fact that we're able to look at that diversity not only of people, but actually of propositions, of things that from a commercial perspective had really cut through with consumers. I think trying to provide a space and a platform where people come together and they can see it and they can actually celebrate that. I mean, I think for me is one really important part of the jigsaw.
Yeah, definitely. I would totally agree. I think it's about celebrating what we've got and then promoting it to get the next generations coming through. And I think your point about diversity, which is always so important, because if you're not diverse, the ideas are all going to be stagnant. It was so refreshing and quite surprising, really, to see how diverse it was through the judging process, and especially at the ceremony. And I suppose that ties in with a question really about EY then. What is EY doing today to support the fintech of tomorrow? And you've touched on it a bit there, really.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, just before we leave the diversity point, I mean, the one thing I would say is I think we did have a really interesting range of winners. I'd love to see more people coming through, either from different racial backgrounds, certainly many more women, and indeed, as we think about some of the other agendas the city is setting for itself, particularly around social mobility, great that we have what we had, but actually there's always space to do better. And then in terms of what EY is doing in this space now, so as I said, we are investing in our wider fintech offering, and what we want to be able to do is to serve really sort of every part of the market. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of offerings out there, often aimed at fintechs that are beginning to scale, that made that early journey and sort of started to break through. And of course, they're always going to be very important clients to us and to other professional services firms. But I think where we really want to try and up our game is certainly around those early stage firms, how we work and collaborate with early stage firms, how we really pull through firms who might be interested in solving what we see as being some of the biggest issues of the day, whether that's around things like ESG or around economic crime. How do we foster and encourage those firms to work with us to actually take a bigger chunk of the market themselves. But also, I think increasingly, I think the Khalifa review put this very nicely. Probably in 5 years' time from now, we won't talk about fintech. We'll just talk about tech. And increasingly, the things that we associate as being techniques from fintech are being used by our major clients. Very, very well established financial services firms. And so, as a firm that serves the whole market from large through to small, one I think the important things is we actually can show we still have a very strong relevance when we're serving those larger clients, and also find ways of putting them together along with capital, along with a whole range of things that a growing business might need. So we can see some effective partnerships being formed across the financial services sector as well, between those very large, well-established players and some of the newer fintech talent that we see coming through. So really, if you were to try and put it in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is take the best of EY and the services that we can offer and bring that into the fintech market, but then also take the best of fintech and bring that to the wider financial services market.
Yeah, I guess, interesting. I suppose, what would you say at the moment is maybe the biggest challenge that you're having, or maybe EY is having within this sort of market?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of potential challenges here. So the first is the UK as a whole, so not just London, has been incredibly successful at fostering early stage fintech firms. Several thousand of them, and we should be all very, very happy about that. But I think one of the things you hear constantly from the industry is, okay, how do we then make the move? How do we get many more medium-sized firms? How do they begin to sort of break through on their growth journey? Not just one or two unicorns, but actually a much bigger group of firms with the right funding in place, the right financing in place, and the right strategies in place. And so, how we can help some of that happen, I think, is really important. Again, it's another really big point that was highlighted in the Khalifa review of, the UK being very good at those early stage firms, but then actually losing pace in that mid-stage scale-up scenario. I think the other thing is we often think about fintech as being more about the tech component, if you like. And there are clearly very, very many very talented people out there in the wider market. But I think one of the things we would observe is often as firms are growing and starting to break through, one of their earliest problems is around the business and the front line outstripping their capability around compliance, their capability around governance, their capability around tax, all of those kinds of issues that for many, many years, clients of all shapes and sizes have turned to someone like EY for. And it's how we make sure that offering that we're so experienced in actually is blended with a really deep understanding of what this is going to feel like if you're a fintech and you're on that growth journey and you're pursuing the numbers as hard as you can. How we help them make sure that as they're doing that, they're growing safely, they're growing in a way that is sustainable, and they've got all the right systems and controls in place. And they may sound very, very boring, but I think for too many young fintech firms, it becomes existential, where those kinds of guardrails just really aren't in place. And again, that's something we can obviously help the wider industry with.
And that's so important, isn't it? Because we want the fintechs coming through to continue their growth, to be sustainable, not boom bust. That's not what we want. And you're right. So some of those areas may not sound sexy or great to think about, but they are vital to having strong businesses. And that's something that obviously you're very, very strong in. So finally, maybe we could ask, maybe what was the best bit of advice that you've been given, or maybe some of the best advice that you feel that you would like to pass on?
So I've been given loads of great bits of advice, I think, over the years from all sorts of different people. But I suppose there's sort of two variants on that famous sort of Mark Twain thing about, it'll be the things that you regret are the things you haven't done, which really is that, one, it will be those things that you haven't done that you regret. I think two, certainly where regulation's been concerned in the past, one of the things I said is you've got to think about not just the risk of bad things happening, but also the risk of things don't happen at all. And so, I mean, one of the huge strengths, I think, of the fintech sector is, firstly, it's full of a whole number of people who are definitely not regretting the things they haven't done. I mean, they're out there, they're trying to do it. But also, particularly as we face into a recessionary environment, the more I think we can do as EY to help that sector get answers to market that will genuinely make people's lives better, cheaper, more convenient, more targeted in terms of the services they really need, much more convenient. All of those small actions can genuinely help wider society. And at its heart, what we try and do at EY is to build a better working world. So, fintech, I think, is absolutely a key component of us doing that as a firm, not just in the UK, but worldwide.
Great. Well, look, Chris, it's been wonderful to speak to you today. Really appreciate your time. And great to hear what EY are doing to really help and support and grow the fintech sector that we have here in the UK and especially in London. And also, obviously, your support at the awards as well. So thank you very much. And look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Matt. Look forward to it.